am Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm excited to be talking to the wonderful Aldis Hodge all about his series Cross. And one of the first things I was actually really interested about how you developed this character is I've heard you say that you kind of immediately found this curiosity and this intellect and this depth to him. And even just within the first few pages when you were reading the script, I know you called your team straight away. And I was
Yeah.
interested in just how finding those few attributes and those traits kind of really set the foundation of the way that you ended up developing this character.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Hello. Happy to be here. Hello to people on the other side watching this. Uh, with the character, first conversation I had with Ben Watkins about the show wasn't even about character development. We just had a discussion about where we were in our lives as men. And I think a lot of that fed, in fact, I know a lot of that fed where we went with the character just because we're talking about, fatherhood, therapy, family life, what it means to be a husband. Um, all of those kind of principles just naturally lent themselves to who Cross ended up being because Cross felt like he was also in a very similar place dealing with certain things. And honestly, with all the different things I was learning in my personal life, I was excited to just go in there and figure out where I can connect because that's kind of how I build a character. I'm like, where are the areas of synergy? Even if it's something that I've never experienced before in my life, you can always connect on the nature of someone's intention, why they're doing it, what inspires them to do it, or why they need to do it. So it just kind of meshed well. And I kind of let it grow organically from there. When I approach a character, I'm thinking about what is my relationship with that character, and every episode is me building and reaffirming my relationship with that character. So, the only intention I had was to draw out his honesty, but everything from there, it's an organic process. You're gonna get what you're gonna get.
I also really like what you're describing there about the conversations with Ben, who's the showrunner of the series,
Hmm.
and it not just being about character, but how are we telling this story? How are we approaching all of these
Hmm.
elements?
Yeah.
Because as an executive producer on the series as well, I've heard you say that it wasn't even just about the character, it was also about wanting to take on this leadership position and to be really immersed in it. And so,
Hmm.
how did the two of you discuss that side of the collaboration and partnership just as much as what it was going to look like in taking on this character?
So, that was also a conversation we had. It was about how we wanted to run the set. I'm like, I Ben, uh, what are your, metrics for your expectations? How do you do things? Because obviously you're the captain, I'm the co-captain. You know, I'm gonna run your play. You know what I mean? And try to support and elevate what his intentions are. And then for me, he asked me what I thought it meant to be number one on the call sheet. And for me, honestly, number one on the call sheet, it's a prime position of responsibility. Also, serve as an EP, yes, but that means I have to have an overview of the entire show. We have to take care of our people. We got to take care of our cast members personally and professionally in terms of their narratives, their directives. We got to take care of our crew. We got to make people feel respected, acknowledged, and just create a nice, even tone where when people come to work, they're there because they want to be there. They're happy to be there. They feel, valued. And it's really not hard to get it, but oftentimes you might run into a situation where things fall off the wheels. I mean, fall off the tracks a little bit because you don't have that leadership from the top down. And we're lucky that we have from Ben to his team, his team of the rest of the producers, from the top down. Everybody's constantly reinforcing the nature of the environment that we want to have and that we want to show up to every single day. So it's as simple as making people feel respected. That's it. And bringing on people who sort of have that same energy where, if they're working with a scene partner, they're working to elevate their scene partner. In doing so, thusly, they elevate themselves in their own performance. But how can we create and cultivate a community of support? That's also very important on the set. So, yeah, we really just talked about that, talked about, again, manhood, um, experiences. There wasn't one time we ever talked about, all right, how do we see Cross? It was like not one time we even talked about that. It was everything else but that, you know. And you know, we ended up having or being able to really produce a great piece of work.
I love that when it's such a natural, cohesive partnership that you get to step into because, as you know,
Yeah.
it's not always the case like that.
Oh, it's rare air. Rare air. Yeah.
And in talking about Cross and his trajectory throughout the series a little bit more, obviously a huge
Hmm.
proponent is him losing his wife Maria.
Hmm.
And I appreciate the way that the show doesn't just deal with one level of what grief looks like. You know, it kind of feels like the love is still allowed to be present, even as he tries to move forward romantically. You know, what does that look like?
Yeah.
How does it implement into his relationship with his kids? How does it influence every day at work? And it's very non-linear for him as well. And I was
Yeah.
very interested in how you found that, especially with the show giving you the gift of having those memories and having those flashbacks to build
Mhm.
upon.
Yeah. So that actually, I really love how they treated it. What I found out on the back end of sort of the experience of viewership was a lot of people watched the show and they said they journey of the pathway of grief that was shown helped them get through their own grief. A lot of people who were widowed recently. I remember speaking to a woman who lost her husband, and she hadn't. She kind of like shut down, and the first thing that she watched um, after a long time of sort of disconnecting was Cross, and then going through that process of watching Cross deal with his grief for his wife helped her process how she was grieving her recently deceased husband. And it just calls to mind the power of impact that we can have when something is done well and done right, which it also brings up the responsibility that you have to have when approaching certain subject matters because people are watching, they're feeding off of this and they're sort of sewing it through their own personal experience. And as an artist, when you do something that actually helps somebody, I don't know if it's necessarily the intention. You know, I think it would be remiss or maybe inappropriate for me to presume I can help somebody with what we do. But when that naturally happens, it's so powerful. And you're like, ah, damn, yeah, that's right. We do that. Like people really do feel this. They do really take it to heart. It just makes everything else so much greater because now you're not only entertaining somebody, but you help somebody at least along their healing journey and pathway. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing.
It is. And
Yeah,
I also feel like it captures it within the friendship that we see between Cross and John in the series.
yeah.
You know, Cross at the beginning doesn't really understand that it was a loss for his friend, you know, this guy that's his brother and his family, as well as for
Mhm.
him, obviously in different ways. And, you know, I love that conversation later in the series where Cross admits, I know that you're right, and I know that I haven't been showing up, and you've been telling me all of these things all along, but I wasn't ready to deal with it and to confront it. And how do you
Mhm.
feel like you were able to really use that relationship and that friendship again to explore a lot of those emotions and feelings in a way that I think we don't often see on screen?
Yeah. So the thing I love the most about that, when it comes to Samson and Cross, their relationship, it shows a brotherhood that's very honest and real and common. You know, amongst men, especially like amongst men in the black community, where there's a general perception that this is not what we do, that we stay away from therapy, that we don't hold each other down. But I don't know who gave that nonsense because, you know, within our community, like I have friends that hold me down like this on a regular basis. Even amongst the men on set, we have our own little brotherhood where we hold each other accountable and we're there for each other and you know we're always in each other's corner. You know, we have a fantastic brotherhood on set, but to be able to reflect that, to talk to people about it and say, no, this is actually what we do and how we get down. When I think about, you know, young men, um, adolescents, you know, teenagers, you know, when they're really finding themselves and feel kind of ostracized or lonely, or, you know, if somebody is to see that and say, oh, you know what? I do have some friends I can lean on, or I don't have to feel like I'm in this by myself. Because truth is, when not, and you'll be surprised when you start talking to people to see what somebody's going through that might connect. But for us, that was another really important relationship to show in terms of what it really means to be a brother. And so many men came up and was like, man, I'm so glad y'all showed that because me and my boys, this is what we do. And that, I love being able to reflect the best of and the most positive of what's normal for us that doesn't get a lot of attention. But to be able to have the privileged opportunity to actually show that is amazing.
And there's even so much between them in that moment where Cross is being forced to hand in his badge and they get into that argument in the locker room, and it becomes the two of them just in
Yeah.
silence because they almost don't even have any words to say to each other in that moment after Cross admittedly
Yeah.
says the most hurtful thing that he knows he can say, as he admits
Yeah.
later on. And I wanted to ask about the different emotions that you found in a scene like that because the two of you really captured the history between them.
Oh, that was a fun day. That's my favorite scene. And that's one of the scenes where I had the most fun. People are like, wait, what? I mean, y'all so emotional. You're crying and you're breaking up. Um, Man, Isaiah and I, we just had fun. We literally looked at the scene. I was like, hey, bro, I'm going to go in. You going to go in? He's like, I'm going to go in. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's get it. And oddly enough, what we heard was that people were behind Video Village, like crying when we were getting at it. They're like, "Oh no, they're breaking up." We're like, "We're not," but they were really feeling it. And then Isaiah and I, that just pushes us to go even further. We're like, let's see if we can mess with them a little bit more. But I was so excited about that scene because I know the value of their brotherhood all the way up to that point. And I was imagining for an audience who's really locked into that, what they're going to experience when it seems like it's falling apart, only to know that it's coming back together. And I might be a little devious, but I just knew what reactions we were going to get, and I was so excited for people to get to that scene because they were like, "No, we don't want to. Oh, how we need the boys back together." And obviously, to your other point about the final episode where Cross has to really man up and not only admit to his friend, but he has to admit to himself, a lot of those things. We see a full journey of maturity, that is rarely, if often, ever seen, rarely, if often, ever really dissected in that way. So to get the opportunity to do something like that in that capacity was, for me, it was great fun. It was awesome and creatively, the best it could be.
And we also see so much in terms of that journey with him as a father and with his kids. And you kind of see all
Yeah.
these little inflections and these moments where he starts to realize that his kids are editing themselves around him because they don't want to risk
Mm,
bringing something up that could bring memories or emotion into play for him, and that they're taking care of him as much as he's trying to take care of them.
yeah.
And I love that it captures that element of there's moments where things are happy and wonderful and great, and then something can happen that just suddenly switches it. Some of them are
Hmm.
bigger moments, like the karaoke scene where suddenly that voicemail starts playing. And sometimes it's getting fast food with my son, and all of a sudden he asks me a really real question. And how did you find that constant ebb and flow between where he was as a parent and where that dynamic came into play?
That comes off of my real lived experience as a parent trying to figure out how not to mess up. I mean, my daughter, she's only 3, but smart as a whip, and kids do everything that you do that you don't realize you do. And then when you see them do it, and you're like, oh my God, it really calls to mind how you need to be more aware of yourself. Kids will make you grow up for sure. It's like I feel like I'm growing up again. And it's been a wonderful process, but it makes you so much more aware of the things that you do have to address and check and fix and deal with, because now you got this little person who's depending on you to help shape them, and you don't want to shape them improperly. So with Crossing, where he's at with his own kids, he's got a lot to manage. I mean, their mom passed. How do you deal with, you know, kids and understanding that pathway? And I do have um friends, um one of my friends passed last August, uh, leaving behind two young boys. So I see the weight that is on the kids. I see the weight that is on his wife, and there's a lot. Everybody goes through something. So you are trying your best to hold on to what you know, even though everything you know is different, it's changed. in some degrees gone. So you have to build yourself back up again. You got to hold it together. He's got to hold together for his kids, but who's holding him together? Obviously, Samson, but he doesn't see it. So there's so much value in what that exploration looks like, and being a parent is like the best thing in my life, but it really evolves who you are, and I'm glad we were able to sort of be along for the ride of Cross's evolutionary journey. Because it's kind of what it was for him this whole season. It was just, we meet him at sort of the hardest, worst, lowest of the lows, and we have to see this guy that we idolize dig himself up from his lowest point in life to still stand up and hold his head high.
Absolutely. And I think everything that you're describing there also speaks to one of the aspects that this show did really well, which is finding the fallibilities in humanity and making that feel
Mm,
connected and relatable. And it sounds like that was something that was really important to all of you from the offset in telling this story. And,
mm,
sometimes it's the bigger ways of doing it, of how am I a parent to my kids when I've lost my wife and they've lost their mom? And then
mm.
sometimes it's just the smaller things of, okay, I'm really good at my job and I'm incredibly accomplished, but what are the mistakes that I'm going to make along the way? And where are my shortcomings within that? And so, how did you find the different ways and the different levels of fallibility that you wanted him to have?
I think I just well, first the writing was really fantastic, so I didn't have to reach very, very high to figure out um, where we were at because the messaging was so concrete, clear, and then now it's like, all right, have as much fun as you can stepping into this space, and obviously his personal life impacted his thought process, his psyche when it came to his work, and it was kind of he's missing a few screws, um, which for me, even just reading the scripts, I'm like, oh, is he gonna make it through this? Like, what's happening? But I just love that we got to explore and expose all facets of humanity. Um, everybody had everybody was sort of like an unpolished diamond, you know, to a point, because they all had brilliance, but a few rough edges here and there in life, and that's just what real life actually is. It's always messy. A lot of these people that we see at the highest points of their careers professionally, you know, are going through a lot personally. Sometimes that everybody's like, find a balance. I'm like, all right, when professional is up here, usually that personal starts to, and you gotta tick those scales. So the fact that we were able to live in that and not have to shy away from it, not have to compromise and submit what we felt was our truth. Obviously, being supported by Amazon to do so, and our teams at well, at the time Paramount, but also with Skydance, like to be supported and being able to tell our truth the way that we saw fit is incredibly beneficial. Also, quite rare and truly helpful for what we wanted to do.
He's also someone who has an understanding of the people that he's pursuing, that he's investigating, that he's trying to
Hmm.
find in these cases, and he really understands the intellect and the intelligence behind what they're doing and how they're doing it, which is quite
Yeah.
interesting to see how that's explored. And there's almost, he does obviously doesn't agree with their actions, but there's a respect in how he understands the intelligence behind it, as
Yeah.
messy as that is. And I was just interested in for
Yeah.
you how that shaped the way that you found Cross stepping into a lot of these cases.
Well, I think that's his superpower. I think the way Cross approaches a suspect, a murderer, killer, whomever, I don't think he's necessarily starting from a point of let me go catch the bad guy, even though that's pretty obvious and apparent up front. I think that he's thinking about it from their human nature. What would drive somebody to do this? Why do they need this? What built these habits? He starts from obviously from the base nature of forensic psychology, but that's what makes him so much more intriguing because he can understand the nucleus of human desire, um, whether that's, dealing with human restraint when it comes to certain things, restrictions, um, feeling suppressed, which often pushes people to extremes. And that allows him to choose, am I going to deal with you one on one, human being to human being, or am I going to deal with you as hunter to prey? you know, you got two choices. I'm gonna pick for you. But I'm always interested in the mindset of someone who pushes extremes. I don't feel like we all have it in us innately to do certain things, but in different situations, we may have the capacity to go beyond sort of lines that we ourselves can't even see. How do we guard against that, which we don't know? How do we um, foresee behaviors that we're unaware that were even capable of? And the thing I love about the way Cross breaks down, the complexities of an assailant, he breaks it down to the nature, the root nature of who they are as a human being. What hurt them there? Is it the childhood trauma, the unhealed child that is acting out in this space? And it helps me understand and informs me of the sort of idea or the definition of what criminality is. And I'm a big nerd. I love all this kind of stuff. I'm like, give me all the complex bits so I can get it. And he does just that, but he does it in a cool, funky, smooth way that I just love watching. I mean, the dude is cool, you know? He's smooth, but that is his superpower.
I think you're right. There's also the aspect of the conversation that he has at one point in referencing the boxing coach that him and Samson had growing up, and
Hmm.
it's the hits that you don't see
You
coming
don't
that
see
hurt the
coming.
most.
Yeah.
And because of that, in talking spoilers towards the end of the season, it's a really big hit for him when he finds out that Nancy is the person who's been targeting his family, because it's
Yeah.
not only I didn't see this, but I let you into my home and I let you close to my kids. And
Hmm.
emotionally, how did you find him responding to that discovery when he realizes?
Yeah. Well, that's the moment I knew that he was truly human because that's the grandest mistake that I think he made in this particular season that forced him to pay attention to his own humanity, in a sort of a bigger way. It's like, wow, it's almost like I invited the wolf into the hen house, you know? I mean, I was so focused over here and, did the job take precedence over protecting my family? Like, what's going on? So, but you need those kind of things. One, to show again human versus a superhuman. I mean, hero versus a superhero. You got somebody who is still flawed and still has things to earn, even though he's brilliant in who he is and what he does. But he still is going to make mistakes. And now I'm interested in what the recovery looks like, you know, because if I'm going to watch this brother season after season after season, I'm talking as a fan now because I like the show. Um, I want to see what growth looks like. What is your journey? Where's your evolution? I don't want to see you at your peak of everything. I want to see you at your peak of some things, but what threatens that, And yeah, I think he had a reset to realize he need to focus differently when there's a lot going on. But that's just what makes him human. And I'm so happy that that's the decision that was made for that story.
No, it's great. And in talking about where we meet Cross at the end of season one, it's
Yeah.
still a work in progress, but it's learning to
Hmm.
find a way to start putting one foot in front of the other, which is something that he's struggled with throughout the season. And so when
Yeah.
you looked at the arc overall of where he's gone throughout this whole season, how did you make the choices of how much progress do I feel like he's going to make versus where is the work still needing to come forward for him in the future?
Gotcha. I'll be honest. I didn't have to make those choices. Uh, I talked to Ben. I let Ben lead. We talked about overall arc and narrative, and for me, I was like, okay, this season is his journey to begin healing. He's definitely not starting there, and he's not even really close, But it's his journey to learn how to see himself and then take that first step to heal, which is really a harsh and sometimes intimidating step for a lot of us. And I think that's the grandest value to pull out of his personal story this season. So, however we got there, I just wanted it to be impactful. I wanted it to be exciting, entertaining, but also rooted in value, which I feel like it was. Thankfully, to our writers and our directors. Um, but yeah, his whole trajectory for me this season was acknowledging the need to heal and then finding the courage to take that first step, which is a scary first step for a lot of us. But, if anybody watched and may have needed to go talk to somebody and didn't really have the courage at first, but was inspired or informed to do so after the season, then, hey, that's the goal right there. That's the end game because a lot of us are in positions just in life, especially now, especially this year, where it's like, look, I need to go talk to a therapist. But it's also the beauty of what we get to do. We get to throw a little entertainment, a little pizzazz on top of some real world, real issues, and get to have a great time doing it. I hope we get to keep doing
I love that. And, going back a little to what you were talking about earlier is coming on board of this as a producer as well.
it.
I loved discovering that you're also a watchmaker, and I
Yeah.
heard that one of the mentors that you work with in that space kind of pointed out you're a great designer, but if you understand the mechanics of what it takes to put together a watch, then you'll become an even better designer, and that you've
Uh,
paralleled that into how you felt about stepping on board this project as a producer. If I understand how the
yeah.
show comes together, it's going to make me a better actor and understand my craft more. And so I wanted to
Hmm.
ask about how you feel like it has done that for your craft as an actor.
Yeah. Oh, you did a deep dive, huh? You had to dig up a couple of interviews to go catch that one. Okay, I see what's happening. Yeah, so this is the second show that I've EP'd. The first was my previous show, City on a Hill, where School of Hard Knocks. I learned a lot about just the nature of producing, discussing story, all that kind of stuff. So coming into this, that experience was really amazing and sort of it was formulaic for me in terms of understanding my approach and how I am as a producer. Um, But with this, I'm also a consummate student. I'm looking to learn, and that's the first thing I told Ben. He asked me as a producer, like, how do you get down? You want to do the work, or do you just, want to kick back and take the title? I said, this is not a vanity credit at all, brother. I'm getting in there, and you're gonna teach me, okay? You're gonna teach me how to be a better producer, because I've been in this game in entertainment, for 36 years now. I love my art. I love my craft. Sometimes I'll be fighting the business a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Because the business part of it, it's a love-hate relationship. That's where the politics lives. But once we cut through it and we get to be able to make what we want to make, however we want to make it, I want to make the best thing. And I want to bring in people and push them to their best level. And as a producer, you're in a position of influence where you can nurture somebody's talent. Hey, man, great take. I know you're feeling a little bit of loss, but like this is your innate superpower as an actor, as an artist. This is what you do best. Yada yada yada. Are you aware of this? Are you aware that you do this so well? And you know what? Forget about the noise overhead. Just focus on this. Boom, next take, knock it out of the park. Like that gets me hype. Really supporting people to their best point and their best moments. And if you could be a part of that journey, and also when it comes to just whatever we do in terms of building the piece of work, I look at the body of work this season as one, cumulative masterpiece. All pieces of a grand painting. And when that resonates with people and they take it, they own it. You put the art out there, it belongs to the people. When it carries a life of legacy on its own, then you've done what you're supposed to do. So I just love to create. I love to learn. And again, I'm a consummate student for the rest of my life because the moment you stop learning is the moment that your gift and your art begins to die, begins to suffer. You got to evolve constantly. So I take it as an opportunity to do that, and I'm just lucky to be working with people who are brilliant at it.
Yeah, well, I love the way that you just described all of that, and I think it's
Oh,
testament to the
thank you,
work that we see in the series. So, congratulations on the show. Thank you so much, Aldis. Really appreciate it.
thank you as well.